Okay, so let's start with the basics. Is automation hype or is it reality? And I want to talk about a couple of ways in which automation works. So this is a very oft-quoted Oxford University report that everyone talks about that says 47% of jobs will be automated. But what does that actually mean? At some level, we can see that there's a high percent chance that accountants, their work will be automated. We even see actors now, their work will be automated. If you're a priest, it's unlikely that your work will be automated. But what does that actually mean? Even if you look at most people who are not in artificial intelligence or in technology, it is very difficult for people, especially end consumers, to understand what the AI opportunity or challenge is. So you see, obviously, this is something that was done in Britain, and people felt both optimistic but scared at the same time. So I want to take a concrete example, and I want to take the example of President Obama. President Obama was at law school, and he was editor of the Law Review, and here he is in a library in the law school. And you and I can kind of imagine what he must have studied. Obviously, he studied a lot of constitutional law, he studied torts, he studied contracts. But what if President Obama decided to go back to law school tomorrow? What would he have to study, and what should he be studying? Well, one of the things that he should be studying is a system such as this. This is a system called Ravel. It was created at Stanford Design School, and it essentially does what first-year graduates of law school do. So what do people do when they graduate from Harvard or Yale or Princeton? They graduate with a lot of debt, and they get a job, which is about $150,000, and the partners in the law firm tell them, go and search everything you can about similar cases or case precedents, and go and search about the judges and the lawyers and what they said. But now Ravel, which was recently bought by LexisNexis, for anybody who's a lawyer, you use a lot of LexisNexis, can do all that. It can find all the precedents. It can find the correlations. In fact, it may be able to find patterns which human beings could not, no matter how much money or energy or law school first-year graduates you put on it. So now if you're a law firm partner and you have a choice, you can hire 3 law school graduates, even if they're from Harvard, or you can get this thing for a couple of $100 a month. It doesn't go to sleep. It works very well. Which one would you choose? And this is how automation affects all of us. Now, it's important to walk through the process. It seems obvious when I'm talking about it, but we are seeing this in every single field, largely because of artificial intelligence. Now, law schools are not foolish. If you go to Harvard or Yale, you see, and this is a report from the Wall Street Journal, everybody's changing their courses. And they're doing it because artificial intelligence is forcing business schools, law schools, medical schools, engineering schools, all of them to change their curriculum, and they have to. They have to do it really fast in order to keep up. And my friend teaches at Yale Law School, and she told me, she said, Aisha, I've been teaching for 25 years, and now the most popular course for first-year law students at Yale is robotics and law. And then, of course, you have all these media blitzy headlines like this one that, you know, a law firm officially hired its first lawyer, which was a chatbot. So one has to be very careful when one reads headlines like this, because this so-called lawyer actually does a lot of routine work, but does not replace a lawyer who has to be creative or actually has to do a lot of talking to the client or with other parties. So you see that the routine work is regularly being replaced. So what is this lawyer doing? Well, you know, 40% of people's time in San Francisco is spent looking for a parking spot. And when you find a parking spot, then you're in a race against time to make sure that you are in time before a police officer comes and puts a parking ticket on it. So these kinds of AI lawyers actually contest parking tickets because they're standard forms that they have to fill out. So you just connect to the court website and you are all the time putting in these kinds of routine tasks. So then the question, okay, can it understand me if you have these AI robots? And here it's interesting, right? We are beginning to see things in AI which seem like they understand or actually have some kind of semantic or at least syntactic understanding. So this is Kensho. Kensho is used by almost every major Wall Street trading desk, and it has a Google-like search function. So for instance, let's say you're a trader and you want to know that what usually happens to cement stocks when a Category 3 hurricane hits Florida. So you're not running around kind of in your Excel spreadsheets, you're giving a question like this. And what it does is it goes through 65 million question combinations instantly, and it looks at 90,000 actions that could happen. For instance, it could be an earthquake, it could be a new drug, it could be many different things that have happened in the world, and the kind of reaction and effect that it has on different stocks, and it gives you an answer. Now, this has become such a big deal that this is the first AI company, this is the biggest exit of a so-called AI company in New York, because it was then bought by S&P for $500 million. So even though it seems to bring a lot of value, I don't think anyone can call it intelligent. It's not conscious, it doesn't know what it's saying. It can run through huge amounts of data and can automate things that used to take hours and hours for human beings to do. And we're seeing more and more of these examples. But if you look in the AI field, there's a lot of kind of despair at the hype cycle that goes with AI. A lot of AI is about big data processing, about getting your data pipelines, about making sure that you're applying the deep learning algorithms. But most AI, nobody in the AI community thinks that it is intelligent yet, or conscious yet, or destructive at the moment. The people who are involved, of course, one has to keep an eye on. And so there is, however, this idea that are we going to reach an end? Is this endless deep learning and other kinds of statistics-based algorithms? Are we going to see another winter in AI? And I think this is, for those of you who are actually studying AI or are AI machine learning engineers, this is an interesting field to look at because, as you can see, it was just in the New York Times recently where an article talked about new kinds of deep learning methods or new kinds of AI methods that are coming out. Something where you can actually, the AI can conceptually understand what is going on, much like a child, as opposed to going through huge amounts of data. Now, this doesn't mean that the value of going through huge amounts of data in a way that human beings can't is something that doesn't give a lot of value to companies. It does. But there are many other types of research that are being done as well. And so when you see the kind of thing that Kensho did, or the kind of thing that the lawyer did, or in robotics or anywhere else, it's really called narrow AI. And the reason it's called narrow AI is primarily because it can only do something within a particular kind of vertical. And what you find is that if you actually try to have chatbots, 80% of chatbots fail. Do you know why? The reason 80% of chatbots fail is because they try to be too generic. So the ones that mostly succeed are the ones that are very specific. For instance, you want to get a mortgage, and it's very contained. And so it's very narrow, the field in which the AI agent needs to answer questions or needs to talk to you. Whenever you try to give it open-ended questions, then it directs you to a real-life customer agent. We are in no position at the moment to have long conversations which require consciousness. Okay, so then comes the whole question of trust. Now, can you trust what the AI is telling you? Well, anybody who's been following Cambridge Analytica knows that it's been in the news recently that there is a lot of distrust that people feel with companies that have a lot of data. What are some of the issues with AI? One is, where is the data coming from? Because without data, and a lot of it, these algorithms don't work that well. How are you processing the data? Did you have the right to the data? Are you putting some bias in the data? Do you even understand the algorithm? Now, I speak to a lot of CEOs, and they love the idea. You know, we've all seen the movie. We've all seen Star Wars and Black Panther. We want to use AI. But they don't have enough people who can trust it. How you build an engine and you give it to somebody, why should you trust its output? So I have a few ideas, and Google and others and many have put out a whole list of principles. I'll just talk about 3 of them here. But it shouldn't be biased. And my co-founder, his PhD is in fairness and bias. So we are writing an engine. We're going to publish a paper which is trying to improve on transparency in AI algorithms and how one can inspect AI algorithms. But this has very real consequences. One of the consequences is that Google at one time was mistakenly tagging African Americans as gorillas. And this was a terrible thing that was all over the news. And the reason was because the image recognition software had been trained on white Caucasian PhD students and researchers. So when they saw something that they didn't recognize, they made a mistake. And so when people started picking up on this, Google, and by the way, it says it fixed its racist algorithm. You can see this is just 2 months ago. And so this is a real issue. This is what is worrisome. Not that AI is going to descend and take over my life right now and replace me completely, but these are the kind of things that we need to be aware of. Another thing is, AI tends to follow the human experts that design it, and it tends to follow the data that you put in it. So for instance, if you say, I don't want an HR manager. I want to build an HR AI chatbot that essentially selects the best people. And you know what, AI chatbot? Here's all the people I selected and all their features. Why don't you just copy that? And now you realize that it's picking a certain kind of person. And the reason is because the data is telling it that, because human beings are biased. And so this is another issue where the data is biased. Most people tend to look at the algorithm, but 60 to 70% of the work is in the data. Cleaning the data, analyzing the data. It's called data exploration. So many times, my team and I'll see my team will jump into the modeling. Oh, let's apply a deep learning algorithm. But then it's not good enough because the algorithm is not smart enough to notice and detect things that you would learn by doing data exploration. So I cannot emphasize that enough. It's sometimes boring, but if you look at data creatively, you can find things and remove them. And of course, now Facebook has said that it is going to make a tool so that fake news is not there. Microsoft has said it'll do something. Google has a framework for it. So a lot of companies are looking at this now. Well, the other thing that I think is very basic and very important is that AI should not manipulate us. Now, you know, one of the interesting things is, you know, if all of us, we tend to feel more empathetic towards people who look like us. We don't realize that. But if there were 2 contestants in an election, and I didn't know much about them, I would tend to choose the one whose facial symmetry is similar to mine. So if you could manipulate the picture of one of the contestants to look like whoever is, and it was completely online, whoever was voting, they would actually be manipulated into voting for the person who looks like them, even though they don't realize that it's so subtle. So these are some of the issues. Here's another one. Fake videos are huge. So basically, you know, there are many videos out there that you can look at that are actually imitating President Obama. And you really feel it has his like voice intonation, it has his expressions, but it's not him. He's clearly not saying this, but these fake videos have been created. There's another thing. For another company, what they did was that they created deep voice software. And you can test it, by the way, online. Basically, let's say one of you is recording my voice just for 3.7 seconds. Now, you can copy the way I speak and make me say anything. So you could call my husband or you could call my clients and make them say something really weird and they would think it's me. It's very difficult to detect this kind of fake news, fake data, fake images. And you may say, why is this happening? Well, one of the reasons was because there was never enough data to train things on. So we started generating fake data to train the algorithms. And these are what are also known as generative adversarial networks, where you train the algorithm on fake data and they're kind of called dueling because they improve the actual algorithm. So it's interesting what happens in AI is that at every step of the way you improve accuracy, but then other issues come up as well. And that's why technology is always a double-edged sword. You can't be, depressingly pessimistic. You can't be naively optimistic. You kind of have to have a head on your shoulders and make these decisions all the time. Now, speaking of decisions, how do we know that we can trust the algorithm? I don't know how many of you have been following Go, but there's a lovely documentary on it as well. So what happened was that DeepMind trained the algorithm AlphaGo with, I think, hundreds of the top Go players, and then it made itself play itself 30 million times, which is impossible for any human being to do. And then at this point, one of the masters, the way it won was it made a move that was so unique and so unexpected that the master said, he kept saying, it's so beautiful, it's so beautiful, it's so unintuitive. I never would have thought of that. Of course, nobody understood why it had made that move, but it was beautiful, it was wonderful. Now, that is fine. But is it fine if you don't know if a military robot is making such a move? Right? We're embedding AI everywhere. In some cases, it's beautiful, it's exciting, it's fun. But if our armies are using it and our police is armed with drones that are running AI, then we want to know. We want to know why certain decisions are made. If my father's health insurance is refused by a healthcare app, startup, getting billions of dollars, I want to know why. And the fact is that right now, we can do some sensitivity analysis. There are more tools coming out, like the Lime framework. But it is hard to backwards engineer why an AI is making a certain decision. And so you have this, what people call the dark secret. It's not completely black boxed for those who understand it, but for people outside it, it's not obvious. Now, GDPR, which is the Data Protection Act of the European Union, is a huge game changer for AI. If you have any work or any company that's doing work in Europe, you have to be GDPR compliant. And I think this is good for us Asians, because it's a bit of a wild west here. They can learn something from us, and we can learn something from Europe. What we can learn from Europe is that data privacy is a human right. And especially Article 22 says, if an algorithm made a decision that significantly affected your life, you have the right to ask the company, why did it make its decision? So right now, we don't have that, right? Right now, the algorithm learns and it gives you some output, and you back test it against some reality, but you don't know why it made that decision. And that's not good. So you have new fields like explainable AI, which is an AI algorithm technique that inspects the algorithm. Now, it sounds good, but remember, there's a trade-off between accuracy and speed, accuracy, speed, and explainability. So when you use algorithms like this, you slow things down and they're not that accurate. So if you go to a company or you go to your investor and you say, I want to be all transparent, but the thing is not going to be so accurate, these are tough decisions that we need to make as society together. And we must take the bull by the horns and we must grapple with these decisions, and I hope we come out on the right side. But this is what happens. There's no magic bullet at the moment. Maybe with quantum computing, when exponentially computing goes up, I think at that point, the speed issue may not be such an issue, but we are investigating that, and many people are investigating that at the moment. So I think these are some regulations. Of course, you know that, in my opinion, education and diversity is at the core of ethical AI. Now here's in the title, they put a title for me that said, why Elon Musk is right. And here's where he's right. Not the hype that people say he's afraid of AI. No, this is actually what he said, among some other things. He said, read the book Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom, and I encourage all of you to read it, and be careful with AI. In other words, act responsibly and educate yourself. So you might read a lot of headlines, but Nick Bostrom's book is really good. And listen, he's a philosopher. So he has this whole Socratic kind of way of going through what will happen if there's a superintelligence. What happens if there are two superintelligences? How will they fight with each other? Where will they get their energy? How will it even come to that state? And I think if we have reasonable, systematic conversations like that, that's important. And I don't think that we should think AI is a black box. It's my engineering team's problem, or I'm incapable of understanding it. So I think most people can understand it. Now, this is the thing. You need AI teams that not full of machine learning engineers. You need social scientists, because social scientists are important. Of course, designers are important because human experiences are important, but social scientists understand ethics, they understand how data is used. And then AI regulators should not only have lawyers, right? Have you noticed that most regulators are lawyers, which is important, but it is a time has come for technologists to be in the front seat where regulation is made. And frankly, some AI regulation can only be managed and governed algorithmically. You can't just put a frame because it's moving so fast. So I think that there's a lot of hope. Singapore, of course, has announced that it is going to have a council on ethical AI, which I think is a really good start. And this is part of Singapore's whole move from smart city being a place where you use technology to have more efficiency, to smart nation, which is much more concerned with people, with skills, with values, more than just technology. However, technology is a fundamental infrastructure that serves as a foundation of a smart nation. And I think this is also very important, that you can't talk about automation without talking about those that are displaced by automation. So how do you deal with that? And by the way, you know who's most vulnerable to being displaced by automation amongst all of us? It's me, because I write AI algorithms that are most easily copied by other AI algorithms. So that kind of stress or pressure is really exciting and drives my team and me forward. We're constantly forced to innovate because we know that things that are logical and very systematic are most easily replicated by machines. So take the case of Singapore. Singapore wanted to be and wants to be the top fintech hub in the world. Yet we know 30% of bankers, unfortunately, in their current job state, are going to lose their jobs because of automation and artificial intelligence. And the CEO of Deutsche Bank said actually half of the people in Deutsche Bank can be let go of. Now, Singapore had two choices. Number one, put your head in the sand and hope it all goes away. Or number two, disrupt yourself. Give out grants for AI. Make sure that every bank is AI enabled. But then what do you do with the people who lose their jobs? Well, you train them. You subsidize their training. You go to Nyan Polytechnic. You go to SMU. You go to all these places and you say, train these people with domain expertise that matters. By the way, no AI team. You know, we do work in oil and gas. We do work in smart buildings. I can't write a single line of code without a domain expert. So you should not undervalue domain expertise. One tends to, because one thinks techies know everything, but actually domain expertise matters. And if domain experts learn how to work with people like us, then together we can build something that's valuable for companies, businesses, and end customers. So this is an example of a course. It's called AI in Finance. Already OCBC, UOB have signed up a couple of thousand people. And I'm also one of the lecturers. But the reason I'm showing it to you is to see how you take domain experts and teach them AI. You just give them an overview. You teach them specifically how it applies to their firm, to their industry. How would you apply it to credit underwriting if there's thin credit files? How would you apply it to robo-advisors? And that makes it interesting, and that gives them enough background, some fundamentals in statistics and AI, so that they can collaborate with AI engineers. And that's how you save people from despair, which is the job of every CEO and of every company. Now, Singapore, for those who are Singaporeans, I've given $500 that you can take from the Singapore government at any given time. You don't have to use it. The best part is you don't have to use it for AI. I think I'm going to take a photography course. People take a lot of moon cake baking courses. But the idea is that you can take anything, including there are a lot of Coursera courses as well, if you wanted it. Now, why is AI important? It's so important that entire countries are making it their national strategy. And I love France. So by the way, China has a 3-year policy by 2020. The UAE has a minister for artificial intelligence. India, Prime Minister Modi's been talking about it. The UK House of Lords wrote a whole report on it. Singapore has an AI strategy. And then France, President Macron announced his strategy, and they called it AI for Humanity. And this is Cedric Villani. He's actually a Fields medalist in math. It's a very big deal. But he's known as the Lady Gaga of math because he wears these really flamboyant kind of bow ties and is kind of fabulous. And he was one of the authors of AI for Humanity. And his point is, AI is everybody's business. And I like that. They are as keen as any other country to be top-notch in AI, in attracting talent, in being competitive, in using it for defense, but they're also putting values and humanity in it. And so I'm going to just end with the hope for AI. Because it's very easy to talk about superintelligence and all those exciting things, but I'm going to talk about this girl. This girl, 7 years old. She was kidnapped, she was raped, she was abused, tortured, and left for dead. And it broke Pakistan, where I'm originally from, it broke the country apart. Because she was not the first, but Zainab was the 7th girl that happened to. In a town called Qusur, which had 4 million people in Pakistan. And so they couldn't figure out what to do. It was like looking at for a needle in a haystack. You know, Pakistan has 200 million people. So they came to the CTO of Punjab, he's a friend of mine, top 40, under 40 from MIT. And he called my co-founder and a bunch of other AI specialists, and they locked themselves in a room. First, they went to the police station. It was all paper. They couldn't figure out who these people were. And they started looking at call data records because they had earlier done some work and noticed patterns of behavior of people who are about to commit a crime. And they spent many nights there, locked in it. And at the end of it, out of millions of men, they produced a list of 29 names. And one of them was this man, this monster. And he is now in jail, and probably going to get the death sentence. I think he's already gotten the death sentence. But for me, this is the hope for AI. She is the person I want to end with, not a robot or not some AI agent, but the good that we can do if we do it together with ethics, but also responsibility. So I leave you with this. Thank you very much for listening to me today, and I look forward to any questions you may have. Thank you.